168 paratroopers flew towards El Gamal airfield, west of the Suez Canal at Port Said.
The boys in the aircraft had this miraculous capability to sleep anywhere, and half of them were straight out cold, having a few Zeds.
Something to do, we started singing, and we all know we was going to the Mediterranean beach, so it was appropriate that we should sing "We Do Like to Be Beside the Seaside." Yes, I do like to be beside the seaside. Oh, I do like to be beside the sea. Yes, I do like to walk upon the prom, where the brass band play till the pom.
As we got near, we all stood up and got ready with our equipment and moved forward to the door. I had my toe on the outside, and looking down, could only see the sea below me.
The red light was on, and then you're all poised up, ready to go. And then suddenly, green on go, and bang, 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 we were all out. There was a moment of beauty. Going out of the door, yellow, buff sand, a great cloud of black smoke from the control tower buildings of this airfield we were attacking, and wonderful coloured sky, a sort of lavender blue, and all these parachutes ahead of me streaming down and opening one by one. And I just remember thinking, this is a lovely moment.
On the ground, the lightly trained civilian resistance mobilized as best they could to support the Egyptian army.
Around 5 a.m., just before dawn, when we heard that foreign troops were landing, we went to El Gamal airfield. We took the guns we'd trained on. So when we saw them coming down in their parachutes, we started shooting at them.
I'd noticed all these fireflies almost streaming across the view. And I did then realize that they must be tracer bullets. And I thought, we're giving these people hell, hooray. Of course, all the wretched tracer was actually directed at us.
As soon as we saw the soldiers coming down with parachutes, we started shooting at them. It was my first time. I was happy to kill even one of them. I was happier and happier the more of them got hit.
I got this incredible smack in the right eye and saw nothing but white fluff on that side. Well, the first immediate feeling was disbelief. You know, I don't believe this has happened. I didn't know what it was, indeed. I thought, well, the eyes obviously had it. As it hit the ground, your parachute took a slight breath, and you came down with luck like thistledown. A lot of bullets came across the sand, sort of dotting towards me, and I thought, bugger this. You know, I seem to have been hit once, and I'm going to get hit again.
The very first thing I saw when I landed, I rolled over and I landed right next to an individual who had half his face blown away. He had half of his cheek was torn out and half of his jaw was gone. He was screaming, and he said to me, "What do I look like?" And I said, "Relax, it's all right, you're going to be okay."
Meanwhile, French paratroopers were landing on the other side of the canal, east of Port Said. A British contingent landed with them. The
French, with their great experience, carried their weapons through their harnesses. And we weren't allowed to, in case they got caught up in rigging lines or somebody else's rigging lines. And so we had to have ours wrapped in containers, personal equipment containers. And so I landed there with no weapons at all, other than this container. And then I couldn't undo the belly thing.
Despite the build-up, most Egyptians were amazed that the invasion had actually gone ahead.
I never had thought that they would do anything like that. I mean, it was incredibly stupid. You must admit today that this aggression was completely idiotic. I mean, you don't just go into countries, like we see that now also, that it's completely idiotic. You don't just walk into a country and invade it. You don't do that sort of thing. For what reason? For nationalizing the Suez Canal?
The Egyptians were putting up significant resistance, and British casualties began to mount.
Well, suddenly this quite big garage was half full of people who'd been brought in on stretchers. And there they were lying down, mostly shocked. And the really impressive thing was nobody complained. These young men had just had their lives ruined, really. And nobody complained at all. Well, I thought, God, if we go on losing chaps at this rate, we're in for real trouble. We'd taken 700 people there, or 600 odd, and if we could lose 20 in a matter of half an hour or so, I thought this is going to be a real party.
هذا صوت بريطانيا يا شعب مصر.
The British were also fighting a propaganda war. Broadcasting from Cyprus, the Voice of Britain portrayed Nasser as the source of all the problems befalling the Egyptian people.
Well, as a sort of crazy man who has nationalized something that is of vast international importance, who has brought death, destruction, bombs and everything else upon the Egyptian people, and who should be chucked out by them. Very, very crudely put, but it was a fairly crude message.
لقد اقترفتم خطيئة وهي أنكم وثقتم في عبد الناصر وصدقتم أكاذيبه. أما الآن فإنكم تستمعون إلى الحقيقة.
Eden's obsession with Nasser is equivalent to Bush's obsession with Saddam. Personal, irrational, unhelpful.
The main body of Paras now headed east, towards the town of Port Said at the mouth of the Suez Canal. En route was a cemetery, which became the scene of a fierce firefight.
If anybody's ever seen any pictures of Dante's Inferno, it would give a pretty good vision of the cemetery, because certainly when we got in there were disinterred corpses. There were these enormous mausoleums, which there were bits and pieces of them falling down and collapsing into themselves. They'd been under fire. There were Egyptian soldiers running all over the place.
British planes were bombarding the Egyptian positions in the cemetery, unearthing long-buried corpses.
We were hiding in the cemetery, and the warplane was flying above us and dropping bombs. We saw graves blow up and corpses swirling around in the air.
There'd be a half a body here and a half a body there, and bits and pieces, and a mausoleum falling down, and a coffin sticking up, and quite a few dead Egyptian soldiers as well. Yeah, quite a few live ones also. It was very heavy fighting in there, and it was very fast. It was kind of like house-to-house fighting in that sense, except it was grave-to-grave fight. There was two Egyptians that were shooting at me from behind the headstones. I walked around the corner. They opened fire on me. They missed, and I fired at them, and I shot them both. And I went over to their bodies, and I took a postcard from out of the pocket of one of them. I just wanted to see who it was. This is the first person I'd ever killed, to my knowledge. I've looked at that photograph a few times over the years, and certainly reflected on how easy it is to take a life when you have a gun in your hand.
The international political battle was proving more difficult than the war on the ground. The British had chosen to invade on the day before the American presidential election. President Dwight Eisenhower, who was seeking re-election, had warned the British that he objected to the use of force against Nasser. Eden now wrote to Eisenhower, convinced he could overcome the American opposition.
Dear friend, I know how strongly you feel, as I do, the objections to the use of force. But this is not a situation which can be mended by words or resolutions. I believe as firmly as ever that the future depends on the closest Anglo-American cooperation. It has, of course, been a grief to me to have had to make a temporary breach into it, which I cannot disguise. If you cannot approve, I would like you at least to understand the terrible decisions that we have had to make. History alone can judge whether we have made the right decision.
They were victims, I think, of their own self-deception with respect to Eisenhower. Eisenhower had made so manifest in the specific letters that he personally wrote to Eden that they could not possibly have not recognized that he was adamantly opposed to the use of force. They perfectly well knew that what they were doing would be opposed by Eisenhower. There's no doubt of that.
The soldiers risking their lives on the ground had little idea of the desperate political gamble being taken in London. At the cemetery near Port Said, the fighting was reaching a level of ferocity that shocked some of the British paratroopers.
I know the expression, take no prisoners. We didn't take prisoners. Yeah. Paras don't take prisoners. Didn't then. Because you didn't. Because you can't, you haven't got the men. You haven't got the men to guard them. You know, there's another problem. This is not an order, it's just a thing. It's a thing, you survive, you're out to survive, you are a few hundred, very small few hundred, against potentially, you know, thousands. And something's going to be in the way, it's going to be a problem. Get rid of the problem. You kill a lot of people. There are some shrubs and there were some men in there. I realised there were soldiers in there, so I turned round and I just did a rake through the bushes. There were a number of casualties there, or dead men actually. Your training ultimately is to kill, and all your training becomes instinctive, and you kill.
Things where somebody with a Bren gun would have maybe 3-4 Egyptian soldiers running, and he'd stayed open fire and see if he could keep them in the air, keep them dancing in the air while he was firing at them. And that was just monstrous to me. That was it was horrendous. I saw so many Egyptians that were essentially executed for no particular reason. I'm pretty sure that if we just kicked their asses, they'd have run home. I felt sick, I really did. I felt utterly sick, and on a couple of occasions I remonstrated and said, why? And I was told to fuck off and mind my own business.
A senior surviving officer from the campaign insists that the Paras followed the rules of warfare at all times.
The Battle of the Cemetery was a very difficult battle. But the important thing